Crime Scene Fanboy. Crime Scene Fanboy turns creepy serial killer wannabe on female officer. Someone on Ask Reddit introduced me to this wonderful sub, and I have a wonderful tale of creepiness to share with you. I'm honestly such a grumpy tomboy. I had never imagined I would end up with a wound stalker, especially not with the career I chose. I was a forensic death investigator. Forensic police officers that generally work with the DA's office and or the medical examiner's office that looks into the cases of suspicious death, homicides, suicides, accidents, etc. Occasionally I run into people who had a passing interest in what I did because I'd seen CSI or Law and Order a few times. No big deal, right? Wrong. So very, very wrong. It started with a homicide scene I've been called to at an ungodly hour in the morning when Mr. Fanboy showed up. He was around his late 30s, early 40s, average height and modestly fit, chattering away with one of the poor unis guarding the scene. Not a big deal. It happens because people are curious, but then he whips out a camera and snaps a few pictures. At that point, I figured he was a really nosy, tone-deaf journalist, and decided to give him a polite lecture on how inappropriate it was to take photos of crime scenes, especially when we were getting ready to move the deceased body. I deleted the pictures, sent him on his way, and figured that I'd never see him again. But no, he pops up a week later at another questionable scene. It doesn't click yet that something is seriously off until a week after that he shows up at another scene, this one being a complete county away from the last. So I worked a major city in Texas through the medical examiner's office, so he took cases from several surrounding counties, a few thousand square miles. So it was odd that this guy would show up to a rather standard scene on the outer edge of a covered area, even if he was press. I mentioned it to some coworkers when I get the chance, and they noticed him hang around some of the scenes too. When he showed up again, me and a uniformed officer shakes him down to see who the hell he is and why he just got a major hard-on for rubbernecking crime scenes. I'm used to rubbernecks. I get it, people are curious and sometimes a bit morbid when something happened nearby. Once the excitement and newness wears off, they go about on their business, right? Mr. Fanboy does not have a criminal record, like not even speeding or parking tickets. So my superior had a talk with him, basically explained that he was making everyone nervous, and it looked really shady to just start hanging out at crime scenes. So he disappears for a couple weeks, before switching to a new tactic. If he can't hang around the crime scenes, why not hang around the investigators? But of course, only the female ones. Fanboy shows up at one of my favorite dive bars that I frequent because it was near my home, over 30 miles from where I work. Now, I am a 5'7" woman who doesn't look imposing in the least. My coworkers used to tease that I looked like I was a kid playing dress-up in my uniform. Like most women, I tried to be polite with a guy who at the time was about 20 years my senior, but declined any offer of a drink. He doesn't take the hints and chats me up with some of the creepiest shit I've ever heard. What's the worst crime you've investigated? Have you ever worked on a case where the victim was dismembered? Do you think rape and murder cases are really about power dynamics and not sexually motivated? So I'm creeped the fuck out. Those are things I don't even want to talk with a therapist, much less a dude who is giving me some seriously rapey, murdery vibes. I completely shut him down, not even trying to be polite, and he seemed a little put off but not apologetic in the least. I went home, put my service weapon back on, called my supervisor to give him a heads up, and started a paper trail for an RO. He served with a cease and desist a few days later, and I figured that the threat of an RO and trouble with the police will deter him from escalating any further. Not even 24 hours after the cease and desist is delivered, he's back to shadowing crime scenes like it's going out of style. At another female investigator's scene, he gets into an altercation with one of the uniformed officers. He gets slammed with trespassing, obstruction, and a few other charges, but since he has no records, he's let out on bail and shows up to a scene. I'm working not 3 days later. We get into a scuffle. After her breaks one of my guy's noses to get onto the scene. He's not as strong as he looks, but I still ended up with a black eye. He looked worse by the time my partner and I finally got him cuffed. An investigation is open, and turned up a police scanner and a lot of creepy journals in his car, as well as notes on where I lived, and worked along with information on one of the other female investigators. From what I heard through the grapevine, his mother's house, where he was living, was creepy as hell. Yeah, I never thought people would be that obsessed with crime scene, forensics, or the like, that they end up going to jail, but here we are. I'm also very aware that he probably had a lot of very unsavory things planned for me and or one of my coworkers, which still makes my skin crawl to this day. So, creepy forensics fanboy, who was probably a Dexter wannabe, who watched way too much CSI and Bones. If you ever get out of prison, let's not meet again. My mom escapes death multiple times. My mom grew up in a large city on the East Coast. She moved throughout the city growing up from apartment to apartment. One night she was walking down an empty street and looked behind to discover that a man was following her, a young girl at the time. This went on for a little while, terrifying my mother, until some bright lights flashed before her. A bus had pulled up. It was well after 10 p.m., a few after the bus schedule stopped for that area. My mom climbed into the bus and asked the driver why the bus was making the stop this late. The driver informed her of the schedule anomaly that had occurred. Tonight happened to be the night when the city assigned him to stop by where the man was following my mother. Who knows what would have happened otherwise. On another location, my mom, still a little girl, was entering an old apartment building to get to her room on the 11th floor. She went to one entrance and noticed that it was taking a while for the elevator to come down. She crossed the lobby to another elevator entrance and saw the doors open, a woman standing inside. My mom walked into the elevator. As the doors closed, the woman asked, "What floor are you trying to get to?" "The 11th. "You're only going to go to the 7th floor." My mom looked at her. "You're only going to stop at the 7th floor," the lady continued, "and then go straight up the stairs. Then you'll take the stairs up to your floor." My mom obeyed the lady and went up to her room. Had my mom continued to the 8th floor, a murderer would be waiting outside the elevator. A murderer who had already killed someone else a little while earlier. On the bottoms of the elevator shafts on the other side of the building, some equipment was burning. Had my mom or anyone else got into one of those elevators, being closed inside would have gassed her to death. The lady was warning people all day, and not one person died, other than the murder as a result. No one in that apartment recognized the lady as a staff, or any residents or anybody else. And no one ever saw the lady again, as far as my mom knows. Nearly abducted from a mall in Saudi. I lived and worked in Saudi Arabia for a few years in the mid-90s. I had some crazy experiences there, but this one was the most frightening. I was in a supermarket buying groceries, and this man started following me around. I ignored him as he tried to talk to me, and kept calling me between Helnan Habibi, sweet baby, and kept asking me if I was Lebanese, but there was something menacing about how he was looking at me. Then he got on his phone and was talking very, very intently on it, while watching me and following me around. This was a big Walmart-sized store, so he was definitely making effort, and this went on for about 20 minutes. I was very nervous at this point, and checked out with my items and started to leave. Just outside the door and into the corridor of smaller stores, there was a group of between 10 and 15 angry-seeming men who all crowded around me and started talking to me in Arabic. I played dumb and just kept my eyes down and kept mumbling about my husband, hoping they would think I was not a lone woman and please let me go. People were walking past me and working hard to not look at this threatening group surrounding a woman. Just then my amazing driver, a tiny little guy about 5'2", bowled through the group and grabbed my arm and started yelling at me angrily. And then at the man. He was yelling, "Wife, I've been waiting. Ah, you're so slow and stupid. What are you doing? Sinful creeps," and threatening to call the police. The men fell back and looked ashamed and confused, and Abdul dragged me out of there, talking loudly about how stupid and useless I was. I just went with him and kept my head down, as tried not to drop my groceries from nerves. We got in the car and turned around from the driver's seat to look at me and let a big breath. He looked terrified. He said he was so frightened for me. He had seen men gathering in the car park and knew something bad was going down. Then he suddenly thought, "Oh no, it's me," and ran in. He said they had been talking about me, taking me. They thought I was Lebanese, and there was very bad blood with Lebanon at the time. They told me there had been some kidnappings in the last month, and the victims burned alive in tires outside of the city. Abdul was a shit shooter, but he had gone whiter than me as he told me all of this, and was genuinely shaken and afraid, so I don't think he was exaggerating at all. After that, whenever I was sent out on errands, he always came with me and pretended to be my husband.